So when we first developed DARE, beginning in 2018, culminating with its enactment in 2020, it was always obvious to us that the crypto space was evolving rapidly. I mean, I recall very late in 2020, right before the bill was over the finish line, we were still making major amendments to the bill because things had progressed so much from the time we initially started drafting in 2019. And so we knew that the crypto space would be rapidly evolving. We knew that there would be risks and activities that would emerge. And we always knew that the legislation would have to be nimble enough to evolve as the space was evolving. And so we anticipated that we would be making amendments to the legislation. And I think coming out of 2022, and I would say even beginning late 2021, with some of the new activities we saw in the space, some of the emerging risks coming out of the so-called crypto winter, and some of the ways that you see activities were behaving very much like activities in other spaces, like traditional security spaces, we thought the time was now to make some changes. We thought we had enough changes to make to the legislation. And so now you're seeing, I think now you're seeing the evolution of the regulation to keep pace with the space. I guess what you're asking me first a question about the regulation and then a question about the broader ecosystem that can be enabled in the Bahamas. And in terms of the legislation itself, I would say that, the Bahamas is very committed to being at the forefront of best-in-class regulation. And what that means is that we're constantly assessing the risks in the space. We're constantly assessing where other regulators are taking the space. For example, MiCA, the MiCA proposals in the European Union is a good example of where the space is perhaps going. And so we have that commitment in the Bahamas to implementing best practices and best standards for regulation. In terms of crypto firms themselves who would be looking for a jurisdiction, I would say that in the long run, substance will be important. And it would be important to show that you have a substantive presence in a jurisdiction and not just a brass plate. And so it would become necessary for firms looking for a jurisdictional home to ensure that an ecosystem, a complete ecosystem exists. First of all, they're able to do banking activities, they're able to hire professionals, they're able to exist in the jurisdiction in a substantive way. And I would say that unlike a lot of jurisdictions who probably have the same type of context that the Bahamas has, I think the Bahamas provides that complete ecosystem for a crypto firm that is looking for a regulated environment. So I think we need to go back a little bit to when we enacted DARE the first time around. We made a mention of stable coins, but I would say that at the time, we didn't see enough of the activity of stablecoin to put in place a full regime outside of putting it in this broad category of asset-backed tokens. I think we have seen enough now of what are some of the concerns with respect to stablecoins in particular, what are some of the risks to the market, what are some of the issues that should be important for investor protection. Some of the disclosure issues, some of the transparency issues, for example. And so I think that now is the time that we are in a position that we are able to address those types of concerns. With respect to staking, we see this activity more and more in the space, and we think that it is definitely an area where investor protection is needed. I would say that's a summary. I would say that's a summary of it. But certainly, I would say that the Bahamas has put itself forward as being among the first jurisdictions in the world to address both areas. Timing of the new amendments are very apt. You may know that IOSCO, which is the International Organization for Securities Commission, just released this morning its recommendations with respect to the regulation of crypto, and that those recommendations are released for consultation. I believe the consultation will end the 31st of July. In terms of where I see this all headed, I think that over the next 2 to 3 years, you will see some convergence globally around the regulation of crypto. I think the issue that crypto is suffering at the moment is, one, many regulators do not have the necessary scope to address crypto within existing frameworks. And two, there is no global taxonomy with respect to a legal framework for crypto. And so I think you will see over the next 2 to 3 years, those issues beginning to converge and a global framework will emerge. That global framework, of course, will be influenced heavily by organizations like IOSCO. And then there will be jurisdictions like the EU, the UK, that are really at the front of developing crypto legislation for their domestic markets. That will probably lead the charge in how other jurisdictions treat with crypto. In terms of the Bahamas' position, I would say that for firms that want to do business outside a major developed market that has its own crypto regulation. So, for example, firms who want to do business in the EU, they'll likely get a EU license. Firms that want to do business in the UK, they'll likely seek a UK license. The same thing with the United States. But there will be firms who want to do business with the rest of the world. And I think the Bahamas will emerge as one of the jurisdictions that is sort of a rest of the world strategy for crypto firms seeking regulation.